Hello, welcome back to Breaking the Code of Conspiracy. First episode, of course, was about global socialism. If you haven't seen the first episode, you'll want to go back and watch it because the second one won't make sense if you haven't watched the first one. But basically, in the first one, I told you that I have made some connections between global programs that are very, very socialist in nature and their federal connection, the provincial connection, and even a local, including Tabor, connection to these global programs. I then showed you how the UN General Assembly, comprised of 193 of the 195 countries in the world, agreed to this 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 goals, most of them, extremely socialist in nature, prettied up with the language that they use, of course, so it sounds real nice, but you and I both know that it's not. So now, as I'm taking you deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, we're going to go to the federal connection here. So this is how globalism is installed at the federal level. Now there are going to be two documents that I will use more than any right now, and that is this Federal Sustainable Development Act. If that doesn't tell you they're implementing global programs, they just came right out and said they are. And then, of course, this, towards Canada's 2030 Agenda National Strategy. So not only are they participating in this global program, but they are quite dedicated to it. So what is this Federal Sustainable Development Act? Well, what this is a report done to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. So this is the Government of Canada's response to a report that was done by this House of Commons Committee on Environmental and Sustainable Development. So a House of Commons committee inside Canada that is focused on this global program. And the Government of Canada had to report back to them. And this is that report. So they are required to report back within 3 years, within 3-year time periods. And when they report back, the committee will give them recommendations and say, okay, these are ways that you could further implement your strategies better. Here's ways you could further work towards these goals and pushing these sustainable development goals. Okay, they report back to this committee, and it's a very, very serious thing. This is very real, and it has very much been happening for quite a while. Now this says, on October 6th, 2016, so that is just under a year less, or just under a year after the September 2015 UN agenda was first announced, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change committed to return to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development within the year with a report on action taken in response to the committee's second report, Federal Sustainability for Future Generations. So this committee made a report on how they felt Canada was doing on this and how they felt Canada could better implement it. Now, the Government of Canada is pleased to report back to the committee on the progress it has made in implementing the recommendations provided by the committee, and that would be in the last session. So our government is very much held accountable by these guys and report back to them. When's the last time your government was that accountable to you and had to report back to you and felt desperate to attain these goals that you really care about? It doesn't happen, does it? Now, let's talk about the Federal Sustainable Development Act. And here's something that's going to shock you a little bit. It starts out by saying, the purpose of the act, which came into force in 2008. In 2008? That's 7 years before the UN had released their 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. 7 years before. It's also when Stephen Harper was our Prime Minister. So Stephen Harper brought in a Federal Sustainable Development Act, an act centered around globalism and a global idea at its core, was brought in by Stephen Harper in 2008, who then, by the way, signed on to the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in September 2015, 2 months before he left office and Trudeau took over. So if you think that politicians aren't all on the same team, what is the explanation for that? That he put this act into play in 2008, 7 years before the UN had even announced that they had an agenda for sustainable development. Stephen Harper the supposed leader of the people, the supposed free government right-wing guy. Well, doesn't seem so now, does it? They all play for the same team, and this stuff reveals it more than ever. So, our good buddy Stephen Harper put us in that boat. Whether you like to believe or not is true. Now this is the second report of the House of Commons Standing Committee on this sustainable development. And these are 13 recommendations that have been given by this committee on how Canada could further implement these goals or do a better job of it. I'm just going to highlight a few of them that are interesting. 1. Taking action to ensure a whole-of-government approach to federal sustainable development. Taking action to ensure a whole-of-government approach, meaning proactively making sure that everyone in the federal government is on board with this. And every department is on board with this and working towards achieving it. How's that sound? Next, determining which federal entities not currently obliged to prepare sustainable development strategies should be required to do so, and facilitating changes to the Act's schedule. So, determining which of their little offshoots isn't actually currently obligated to be involved in these sustainable development goals, and ensuring that they are involved in these sustainable development goals. Introducing additional measures to improve enforceability and accountability. So, as this plan is moving further ahead in its development, now it's time to introduce additional measures of enforceability and accountability. Our accountability, their enforceability, just so you know. Holding a public consultation on the Canada we want to build and maintaining an ongoing conversation with Canadians. Well, I'll get to that later about their public consultation. Later in this episode, I will tell you about that. But for now, let me just summarize it as being a total joke and a total sham. Now, this next page, developing the 2016 to 2019 Federal Sustainable Development Strategy. So, like I said, in 3-year increments, right? Because they have to report back every 3 years to this House of Commons Standing Committee. So they're developing the strategy now to get them through the next 3 years. The only thing I wanted to call to attention on this, to go back to this determining which federal entities not currently obliged should be required to do so, reflecting the committee's recommendation for a whole-of-government approach, the 2016 to 2019 strategy provides broader participation across the federal government than ever before. 15 federal departments and agencies participate voluntarily in the strategy in addition to the 26 required to do so by the Act. This brings the total number of departments and agencies to 41. 41 departments and agencies within the federal government directly working on implementing these goals. They are very serious about this. Very serious. Next thing I wanted to draw your attention to is this plan. Now, this is based on the recommendations, of course, of how the federal government can further implement these plans and these goals, right? It goes along with their federal sustainable development strategy development, their public consultation, 3, the final strategy tabled, 4, departmental strategies, how each department is going to go about doing it, 5, departmental reports, federal governments and agencies table departmental reports, and 6, FSDS progress report. So once again, a progress report, but this time to the committee. So let's find out this number 2 part here. It talks about public consultation, and they talk here about public consultation, and later they will talk in here about how it's important that we consult the public and get their opinion on it. So I will show you exactly how much of our Canadians' opinions they got in order to move ahead with these goals. For that, I'm going to have to return to this, towards Canada's 2030 Agenda National Strategy. Now, as we move forward into it, engaging with Canadians. Okay, so this tells you exactly how they engaged with Canadians. Let me read these stats to you. We heard from a diverse range of stakeholders, including all levels of government: Indigenous peoples, municipalities, civil society, the private sector, academia, and youth across Canada. Okay, so the Sustainable Development Goals funding program directly supported 65 plus in person conversations, 60 plus Indigenous peoples consulted, 40 plus community consultations, and 20 plus policy briefs. 65 plus in person conversations. That's what they had to discover how the public would feel about this, to get the feel for how Canadians felt about these sustainable development global goals. 65 plus in-person conversations. We have 65 plus in-person conversations within the span of a week. Online engagement platform, 1,817 total. Top 3 engaged pages by number of visitors. Their national strategy page, so that would be this booklet itself, 568 visitors. That's it. That's page visitors. That's not people that read anything. That's not people that agreed with anything or answered a poll or questions on anything. That's page visitors. Okay? I started a website for our group a while back that has had over 568 visitors within the first couple of months it was on there. So don't tell me that's polling Canadians. Leave no one behind, 428 visitors, and our challenge, 421 visitors. So between their 3 little websites and pages, they had a grand total of about, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 visitors, page visitors. And that's good for online engagement platform. In a country of 33, 35 million people? 240 plus youth participated in policy jams, research studios, and pop-up labs, and reached over 40,000 more through online channels. 2,500 plus Canadians engaged in face-to-face conversation in 30 plus cities, in 13 provinces and territories. 2,500 plus Canadians were told about this stuff face-to-face. Wow, that's a pretty good representation of 33 million people, 2,500 people. 500 plus Canadian companies and organizations shared their perspectives on Sustainable Development Goal business priorities. 500 plus Canadian companies and organizations reported back. There you go. Collusion, globalism, colluding with business, governments, business, colluding on a global level. Literally, guys, it's not conspiracy theory. They're telling you. Social media, this is the funny part. 500 plus online survey submissions received. Wow, 500 plus. That was 33 million. That's pretty accurate, I'm sure, of our population. 87,500 Twitter impressions. I don't Twitter, so I really don't know what impressions are, but whatever. 114 Facebook likes. I'm not kidding. 114 Facebook likes, and they're proud of that. And say that is the community, the Canadians engaging. 114 Facebook likes. I'm sure some of the girls on this page have gotten that for some of the pictures they posted. Like, this is they're engaging with Canadians, guys. It's a joke. It's a sham. It's a sham. They're not engaging with us. They're just doing the very, very bare minimum, which that's not even the bare minimum. That's far below the bare minimum. And I just want to go deeper into one of these recommendations about the whole of government approach, right? Which is a little bit frightening to hear, I'm sure. To enable a whole of government approach, it is proposed that the Act be applied to all federal departments and agencies within the core public administration and additional selected agencies. This would significantly increase the reach of the Act by going from 26 to more than 90 departments and agencies, extending its requirements to federal institutions that are not currently covered but have a significant environmental footprint. For example, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So the RCMP then becomes an enforcement arm of the UN 2030 agenda, essentially. They literally just told you that here. To enable a whole of government approach, it is proposed that the Act be applied to all federal departments and agencies, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Well, what job would they have other than enforcing the rules, right? And they talk about increasing enforcement and accountability. Not our accountability. Well, are us being accountable for their goals and the implementation of them, but no accountability from the government. Scary stuff, isn't it? They come right out here and tell you. Now, why do they come out here right out and tell you? I'll show you why. Because under another one of these recommendations, it says the principle of openness and transparency, which serves to maximize the release of information to support accountability and citizen engagement. So that is why you can find things like this, the Federal Sustainable Development Act, and print them off. How Canada will implement 2030 national agenda. You can print those things off because they want to be accountable. Well, not accountable. They want to be what they call transparent. What it really means is they're going to tell you what they're going to do before they're going to do it. But who would have known before that to look this stuff up, right? Who would have known? Not even me, and I do this stuff all the time. All the time. So another one I want to hit on, Recommendation 7. Putting in place measurable targets was a priority for the government in developing the 2016 to 2019 Federal Sustainable Development Strategy, resulting in stronger and more ambitious targets than were presented in the consultation draft or in previous strategies. So now they have targets that they have to reach. Number targets, statistic targets, percentage targets. And they found that that was a priority for the government in developing this new strategy and resulting in stronger and more ambitious targets. Great, eh? Now, that's about all I want to go over this, is just to show you. This Federal Sustainable Development Act, signed on originally by Stephen Harper in 2008, now continued on into Justin Trudeau's reign as King Dictator of Canada. So Harper and Trudeau, despite the fact that they seem polar opposites, have very much worked on sustaining the exact same globalist program. In fact, Stephen Harper introduced it and then signed off on it right before he left office, and Trudeau picked up the ball and went running with it. It's collusion, guys. It doesn't matter who you're voting for. They are cheating. They are working together. They are colluding with business. They come right out and say it. Now, the next one I want to go over, and we're just going to go over a few things because I don't want to stay too long in the federal. They're quite open and quite transparent about what they're actually going to be doing. Just most people don't know, don't find this stuff, don't know it exists until it's too late and it's already been implemented. So I don't want to go over the federal stuff too much. But there are some things that are worth looking at. Now, the introduction to this, which is Canada's 2030 Agenda, their national strategy. In September 2015, it says, Canada and all United Nations member states, 193 of the 195 countries in the world, adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a shared blueprint for partnership, peace, and prosperity for all, people and the planet, now and into the future. The 2030 Agenda focuses on the commitment to leave no one behind. Leave no one behind. That means you will be forced to participate. Every country and every person in every country will be forced to participate. That's what that means. It doesn't mean they're going to come back and rescue you. It means they're going to make sure you're just as screwed as everybody else. To inform the development of the national strategy, public consultations were held from March 15th, 2019 to May 15th, 2019. Well, we went over those public consultations, didn't we? They were a joke. This consultation captured the feedback of almost 2,500 Canadians engaged in person. Okay, so that's enough of a citizen sample size to institute globalism. 2,500 Canadians out of 33 million. And just to show you how much deeper this deception and this idea that, oh, the public contributed and agreed to this stuff. Here are, key objectives of Canada's approach. One of them is awareness. Increase public awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals, their relevance to Canada, and national and local efforts to achieve them. So remember when I said in the first video that I was going to tie it back to local programs? I was going to tie it back to things that were happening right here in Taber, or maybe right where your town is. Well, not maybe, they are happening in your town or your city. You just have to look to find them, and we will get to that. when we get to the local episode. But this is just letting you know exactly how it's implemented. They talk openly about national and local efforts to achieve them. Integration, support and promote policies and initiatives across different levels of government. Different levels, meaning municipal, provincial, federal, that contribute to meeting the SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, domestically and internationally, and identify opportunities to enhance policy integration and coherence. Look for opportunities to make this program even more deeply embedded within our society and within our culture and within our government. It's all here. It's all here for everybody to read. Now this gets a little bit complicated. This is what we heard, okay? This is them saying, oh, this is what we heard back from Canadians. Several organizations across the country are already using the Sustainable Development Goals to frame, monitor, and report on their social impact, and many more are currently exploring ways to further contribute to the SDGs. Nevertheless, it is clear that many organizations had not heard of the SDGs. So many organizations had not heard of them, yet they consulted the public, and your regular Joes are supposed to know? Yeah, they knew damn well we didn't know, guys. They were unaware of how they can contribute and of the extent to which they were already contributing. There was a noticeable need for greater awareness and engagement across all sectors, including business. The private sector in Canada is starting to look beyond traditional corporate responsibilities. Think about that. They're starting to look beyond what their usual responsibilities are as corporations, to implement innovative business models that generate social and environmental value in a sustainable way. Stakeholders also express their need to understand the business case for SDGs and to develop opportunities for businesses, especially small and medium-sized ones, to work more closely on the SDGs with civil society organizations and governments, government and business colluding. They wanted to look for ways to squeeze the smaller and medium-sized companies and ensure that they also work more closely with civil society organizations and the governments. So big corporations squeezing down on the little guy to ensure that they follow along with what Big Daddy UN and the globalist people want. That's literally what it says here. Business and government collusion on global goals. It literally doesn't get any more globalist than that, guys. It goes on further. A number of academic institutions in Canada are taking a leadership role in advancing sustainable development across the country. Number of academic institutions, so also your universities and colleges. Along with a rise in sustainable development research, some institutions are aligning the direction of their strategic research with the Sustainable Development Goals. Many academic institutions are pursuing engagement activities and developing curriculums that empower students to make informed decisions in favor of sustainable development. Okay, that's a total oxymoron right there, by the way. Developing curriculums in universities and in schools across Canada that empower students to make informed decisions, but in favor of sustainable development. An informed decision means that you have both sides and you have all options available to you. And that is how you make an informed decision, because you're informed on what else is out there. They want you to make an informed decision in favor of their sustainable development. That is an oxymoron. And there's a lot of morons that wrote this. Canadians were clear. Yeah, the 2,500 of them that we don't know what their responses were, by the way, just the number of them that viewed the pages, that the SDGs cannot be implemented in silos. Achieving the SDGs requires leadership at all levels, including the federal government, the provinces and territories, municipalities, and national Indigenous organizations. Stakeholders, particularly from civil society, underscored the fact that action needs to be community-driven and supported by efforts to enable local contributions to sustainable development. Local contributions. Like I said in the first video, globalism, in order for it to succeed, has to be instituted at a local level. And that's exactly what they're telling you right here. And that's exactly what they did. Now, This part is more comical than anything, really. But this is what they say, what Canadians are saying, okay? And it's got quotes here praising these sustainable development goals. But do you want to know who the quoted Canadians are? The Quebec Business Council on the Environment, the Youth Climate Lab, the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation, Globalist, Community Foundations of Canada, Ontario Council for International Cooperation, the Ontario Globalists, Sustainable Development Solutions Network Canada. Does that sound like regular Joe Canadians to you? That's what Canadians are saying? No, that's what your corporate buddies and your organizations that literally support you by name said. Not Canadians. Canadians, like you and me, the real Canadians, we didn't have a say in any of this stuff. And then the last thing I want to point out, because I think I have proven here that clearly Canada is well on board with this UN 2030 agenda for sustainable development, which should really scare all of us and does. Now it says here, the 2030 agenda is universal in nature and applicable to every country. Every country, guys. The 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals are as relevant in Canada as everywhere else in the world. The 2030 agenda is ambitious and aspirational. It acknowledges the requirement to move beyond conventional actions to seek transformative solutions. Maybe like kind of what we're seeing now with COVID-19. Have you noticed any unconventional actions to seek transformative solutions? I think so. And yes, that is part of it. COVID, of course, ties right in with this stuff. The SDGs are interlinked and indivisible. The achievement of any goal is linked to the achievement of others. So they don't want just one of them or a few of them. All of them will be done. The 2030 agenda can only be achieved when no one is left behind. Well, why can the agenda only be achieved when no one is left behind? Because it is a globalist agenda, a global socialist agenda, global control, world control. It's not the conspiracy theory it's been painted to be. And there's proof right here. What else do you call that? Ensuring that every person can participate in, contribute to, and benefit from sustainable development. So they want to make sure that every person buys into their program, but only 2,500 of you were polled, and they weren't really polled. For all we know, who knows what happened there. So based on that small sample size, which I'm sure they manipulated and didn't tell the truth of what these programs actually are, agreed to it, or maybe gave it a favorable response, thinking it was just, the government's just tossing ideas out there. No, they're just covering a base so that they can institute these socialist policies in our country. And like they say, it goes down to the provincial level, the municipal level, to Indigenous organizations, everything. So in episode 2, we will go over the globalism at the provincial level. Thank you for watching.